Hello, and welcome to today's session on qualitative data collection techniques, where we'll be focusing on participant observation and fieldwork. My name is Ibrahim Osman Adam. Before we begin exploring the practical aspects of participant observation and fieldwork, let me set the stage by explaining why these techniques are crucial in qualitative research. These methods allow researchers to gather rich, detailed data by immersing themselves in the natural settings they are studying. So we will be covering the following key areas: what participant observation and fieldwork entail, how to conduct effective participant observation, and then we'll also look at some best practices. We'll also look at challenges and ethical considerations, and also how to record and analyze field data. And in fact, analysis will come in our next lecture as a full-blown lecture. So let's start off by trying to understand what fieldwork and participant observation are in the context of qualitative research. Now, this slide shows us two key points, along with a framework for understanding where participant observation and fieldwork fits in the research process. Looking at the hierarchical framework from the bottom to the top, we see philosophical assumptions as a foundation, research methods building on those assumptions, and then data collection techniques as the next level. And this is where what we are looking at today is very well situated. Now, this slide makes two fundamental points about fieldwork. First, fieldwork, which is also known as, in some cycles, as participant observation, is a data gathering technique specifically designed for qualitative researchers. Second, it has a very specific purpose, and the purpose is to gather qualitative data about the social world. And we can do this in two ways: by interacting with people or by observing them in their natural setting. I want to emphasize the fact that the key here is that we are studying people in their natural environment, not in an artificial setting. And this will allow us to capture their genuine behaviors and their genuine interactions. Now, moving on, I want to take some time to clarify the distinction between two important research approaches: what we call observation and what we call participant observation. First, let's understand observation. This is when you are watching other people from the outside as an observer. In this case, you are essentially taking a detached and an external perspective on what's happening. In contrast to that, we have what we call participant observation. And participant observation goes a step further. With participant observation, you are not just watching, you are actually getting involved. You observe people doing things, but you also participate to some extent in these activities yourself. The main idea behind participant observation is particularly important because you are talking with people and interacting with them in order to gain an understanding of their beliefs and activities from the inside. This internal perspective is what makes it especially very, very valuable. Now, there's a key trend worth noting. Most qualitative fieldwork tends to favor participant observation over just pure observation. And this preference exists because getting involved in the activities often provides us with a deeper insight than just watching from outside. Now, according to Spradley, all participant observation takes place in social situations. And there are three key elements we need to understand. First, let's talk about place. A place is any physical setting where people engage in social activities. This could be the streets, it could be offices or villages. Any location where social interaction occurs can be referred to as a place. Second, we have actors. Actors are people, or people become actors when they play specific roles, especially in certain situations. So let's think about a bus scenario. With a bus scenario, we have passengers and a driver, and they each play distinct roles in that social setting, in the bus setting. Then we have the third. The third, there are what we call activities. Activities are recognizable patterns of behavior that people perform. And if we're using the bus example again, one activity might be how people select their seats on the bus. It is a pattern of behavior we can observe and analyze. These three elements, and I mean place, actors, and activities, form the basic framework for understanding social situations in participant observation. Each of those elements gives us different insights into the social world we are trying to study. Now, when we are analyzing social situations, according to Spradley, he identifies 9 key dimensions that researchers should all consider. One is space. This refers to the physical space or places where the social interaction occurs. The second is the actor, and these are the people involved in the situation being studied. Then we also have the activity. Activity basically represents a set of related acts that people perform. Then we also have the object, and these are the physical things present in the situation. Then we have the act. The act basically, they are the single actions that people will perform. Then we also have the event. The event is a set of related activities that people carry out. Then we have time, and this refers to how activities and events are sequenced over time. Then we have goal. These are the things people are trying to accomplish. Then the last one is feeling, and this captures both the emotions felt and expressed by a participant. Now, each of these dimensions helps us understand different aspects of of social situations. So, for example, if we were studying a classroom, we'll be looking at things like, in that case, the space will be the classroom layout. The actors will be the teachers and the students. The activities will be teaching and learning. The objects will be books and desks. The acts will be writing and speaking. The events will be lessons and then discussions. The time would be the class time, the class duration, and the class schedule. They also have the goals. That will be the learning objectives. And the last but not the least is the feelings. The feelings will be the engagement and the frustration. Maybe the frustration of the lecturer, the teacher, or frustrations of of the students. Now, the next thing I want us to explore are the core elements of participant observation. And participant observation, as we have indicated, is a powerful method in qualitative research. So we'll begin with some core elements. And the first we want to start with is immersion. You see, when conducting participant observation, you must fully embed yourself in the natural setting. You must be part of it. And this is not about being a casual visitor. Your goal must be a very prolonged engagement. Maybe you may spend weeks, months, and sometimes years. And when you spend this time, it will help you to truly grasp the cultural context. Now, one of the most challenging aspects is managing the dual role of the researcher, because you are simultaneously a participant and an observer as a researcher. To explain this better, try to picture yourself at a wedding where you are both a guest and a researcher. You may be dancing, eating, and celebrating, but you may also be mentally noting patterns of interactions, maybe some sequences that are happening, and maybe some power dynamics at play. Then we also have to consider something: recording. Your systematic recording of what is happening is very, very important. It's very crucial. You have to keep field notes, and those field notes are your lifeline, your scientific lifeline, because that is the evidence you are keeping. Always, I try to mention that if you don't write things down, then it means that it never happened at all. You must always document what is happening. And when documenting, Try to use multiple recording methods. You can use audio to record or document. You can use video, photographs, journals, many others. What you have to understand is that each captures something unique about your field experience. That is why it is important that you use diverse recording approaches. Then finally, there is the issue of what? Reflexivity. And perhaps we can say that this is the most intellectually demanding component of the core elements, because you must constantly examine how your personal your presence affects the research environment. The fact that you are a researcher and you are part of the environment, what biases are you bringing in there? How might your gender, you being male, or your age, or your cultural background, how will it influence what you are actually observing in the field? Now, continue our lecture. I want us to examine two key positions when we in terms of what we refer to as the spectrum of involvement. The first one I want us to look at is the complete participant. And we are considering this in the context of what? Types of, we are considering this in the context of types of participant observation rules. The first one is the complete participant. This researcher actually goes undercover. The complete participant. This researcher goes undercover, fully immersed in the setting without revealing their research agenda. So you think of it in terms of maybe an anthropologist joining a community as a new member. And the anthropologist will participate in all activities while secretly what? Conducting his or her research. This approach offers unfiltered access, but it also raises a number of significant issues in terms of what? Ethical considerations. In contrast to that, we have what we call participant as observer. Now, participant as observer operates with some level of what? Transparency. They openly acknowledge their dual role while actively participating. So they will indicate that, look, I'm a researcher. And then once they disclose this, they are also participating. This typically leads to a richer relationship with the participants, who can become, maybe they can become research collaborators after understanding that you are not only there as a participant, but also you are there as what? As a researcher. They can collaborate with you. Now, consider a researcher studying workplace culture as an example. He would take his job maybe within an organization while being open about other research objectives. Now, what we have to consider is that each role has its distinct advantage and challenge, but the key is selecting the appropriate position based on your research goal. You may also have to consider some ethical considerations and the sensitivity of what the research context. Now, moving to the other end of the involvement spectrum, let's look at another type, observer as participant. The observer as participant maintains more distance. And in this case, the researcher primarily focuses on observation with limited participation. We can use this by picturing a researcher studying maybe classroom dynamics. And in that case, the researcher may occasionally help with activities, but mainly will be watching from the sidelines. In this case, interactions would tend to be more structured and a bit formal. Then there's the other one, the last one, the complete observer. As for the complete observer, he or she takes the most detached stance. Think of watching through a one-way mirror. When we are dealing with complete observers, they avoid any participation or interaction that could influence the setting. This approach works well for studying public spaces or situations where interaction would disrupt the natural behavior. So in instances where researchers act by being complete observers, they don't disclose and they just stay as strangers, because the moment they disclose who they are and why they are there, it will disrupt the way people will tend to behave. Now, depending on which of these spectrum of involvement we are engaged in, each position we take on this spectrum requires careful consideration. We always have to consider the research objectives, access requirements in terms of access, in terms of the site, the field. Then we also have to consider other ethical implications and maybe the potential impact on the quality of the data we are going to pick. Okay, now participant observation and fieldwork comes with quite a number of advantages. And some advantages are the fact that when we use this particular data collection approach, you realize that the data we collect, because we are collecting it from the natural setting, the data is usually rich and detailed. Then it also provides researchers with a deep understanding of the context and the meaning, because the researchers are closer to the data. Then access to tacit knowledge. There's also the issue of flexibility in data collection approaches, because as observer, you are able to control a lot of dynamics, a lot of time on your hands. Then there's also the issue of direct experience of phenomena and also the development of thick descriptions. However, it does come with some limitations in terms of time and resource constraints. The potential of researcher bias is also there. Then the fact that we are looking at a qualitative phenomena, the generalizability to a larger population is also an issue. There are also issues of access difficulties, ethical challenges in terms of the rule maintenance, whether we are going to be distanced from the natural setting or we're going to be complete participants. Then also there's the issue of complex data management requirements when we're dealing with qualitative data, because with qualitative data, either you may record it, you may use notes to do that, and dealing with them can be quite complex sometimes. Now, how can one conduct fieldwork? Conducting fieldwork consists of 3 distinct phases. So we're now going to look at it, and each has its own specific purpose and activities. The first one is the planning phase. At the planning phase, this is where you lay the groundwork for your research. At this particular stage, you need to decide what you want to do. You need to also determine why you want to do it, and maybe identify what resources you would need. Then we have the collecting phase. For the collecting phase, this is the active fieldwork stage. This is where the actual work actually happens. So this stage is where you gather the data. This is where you make the notes. This is where you do the recording of observations about what is happening and about what is happening actually. And this is also where you document the character of the informants. This is where you note every detail about the collection, the events that are happening. Then the last one is the analyzing phase. This is the final stage. And at this stage, you index the field collected materials, the data you have collected. You summarize the materials, and then you try to do what? You try to write up your findings. Now, how do you prepare? As a researcher, how do you prepare for participant observation and fieldwork? Let's go through each of these components to ensure, and it will help us to ensure that we can carry out successful fieldwork. The first component is purpose. Purpose. You must clearly understand your fieldwork's purpose. And by this, we mean that you should check this understanding with your supervisor. Why are you doing the fieldwork? And you should be prepared to explain your project clearly, your work clearly, in an enthusiastic manner to anyone at all you meet. The second component is gathering information or data. At this particular stage, you should be able to organize and prepare by gathering background data about the field site. You should also be able to learn as much as possible about both the people who are there and the place. You should be able to know all these things. Then the third component is the key informants. You should be able to identify key informants before even you begin the fieldwork. And the key informants are the people, as people must be respected by you when you visit the site. The fourth one is enculturation. Enculturation is a process of becoming very familiar with the organization and its culture. And by this, you need to focus on gaining people's trust and then building some level of rapport with them. You should also try to understand the language that they speak, if necessary, so that you'll be able to plan the appropriate way to deal with them. Sometimes it even involves dressing. How you dress into that environment is also very important. Then the fifth one is gaining access. Gaining access basically involves the processes you will undertake to navigate passing the gatekeepers so that you'll be able to access what? The research site. You'll be able to enter the organization at the right level. If you want to penetrate and get to the senior level, you should be able to navigate your way through by addressing the ethical concerns as early as possible in terms of how you are going to preserve informant anonymity, confidentiality, and even when you are publishing your findings, how you are going to deal with some confidential stuff. And then the last one is equipment. You have to ensure that you are very familiar with your research equipment. If you are using a recorder, make sure you test it and ensure that the recorder is working very, very well. Now, gaining access to the field. At this particular stage, I want us to explore the critical pathways we can use to gain field access, especially in participant observation research. The first one is a formal access. We also have informal access and then access negotiations. In terms of formal access, you need to understand that first, you have to identify who the gatekeepers are, those who have the authority, and those who have the authority to grant you access. You need official permissions. And this is the stage, at this particular stage, if you need introductory letters, this is the stage you get all those things ready. Then we also have informal access. You can also gain access to the organization or gain access to participants informally. And this involves the human element largely. You can build networks within your research setting and then identify key informants who can guide you. And then you can understand the different kinds of hierarchies that are there and how you can learn some other maybe cultural protocols to help you navigate your way through in an informal way. Then the third one is access negotiation. As a researcher, your communication strategy is very important. So you should always present clear benefits of your research to stakeholders. Why your research is important. You should be ready to address their concerns in a very proactive and very candid manner so that you'll be able to manage their expectations about maybe time commitments and other potential disruptions. I have already mentioned the issue about building rapport. I just want to touch on it a bit, especially emphasizing on the concept of what? Enculturation. You see, it is very important for us to ensure that those we are going to be interviewing, we try to build some level of confidence with them. Because sometimes for some participants, we only get one shot. And that one shot will be the first impressions you create. So and to do that, we have to be very careful, especially in terms of showing cultural sensitivity from the first time we are meeting. We should be able to communicate clearly about our research, but we have to, first of all, try to focus on what? Building a trust with the participants. And remember, we always have to remember that we are entering their space. When we try to interview people, we're entering their space. And so relationship development is very, very important when we are doing that as well. Regular interaction is key. We have to be present. We have to be consistent. And we have to show genuine respect for especially what? Local customs. And when we are talking to people, we must pay attention and listen actively. And we also must maintain professional boundaries. Sometimes the rapport we gain with people whilst trying to interview them, whilst trying to observe them, may generate into something, and we have to be very careful as researchers. The last part I want us to look at is the part in terms of what? That deals with trust building. We have to be very transparent about our research goals and stay consistent in terms of what? Our behavior. Because people will notice when you say one thing, but you do another. So we have to be very consistent. And then we also have to practice the concept of what? Reciprocity. We have to be able to give back to the community that's helping us. And then lastly, we should be able to develop cultural competence by learning what? The do's and the don'ts. Now, I want us to now explore the architecture of observation protocols, the essential framework that can help us capture meaningful data when we are conducting qualitative research. And let's break it down. The first part is the observation framework. The second part is the documentation guidelines. And the last part is the quality control. Now, let's try to understand observation framework. Imagine you are setting up maybe a camera to film, say, a scene. We need to be able to decide, do we want a fixed frame, maybe that's structured, or Do we need a fixed frame where, exactly we know what we are looking for, or do we want some kind of freedom to follow the action wherever it leads us? In that way, whereas the first one will be structured, having the freedom to follow the action wherever it leads us is a bit unstructured. But both approaches can serve different purposes. We also have to consider what we refer to as time sampling. Time sampling methods are like choosing between taking a continuous video or taking what? Bits, snapshots. But each method will tell us a different story, whether we're using continuous sampling or not. Then the third part is the documentation. The second part is documentation guidelines. We always have to think of ourselves as both a journalist and an archivist. We are preparing field notes. Our field notes are not just observations. They are also the foundation of our research narrative. And then later on, the coding systems will develop will be like creating a detailed map of our data. So we have to be very careful in terms of the format of the documentations, the notes we are going to keep, and whatnot. When it comes to coding system, we'll deal with this much when we get to the analysis stage. The last bit I want us to consider here in terms of the protocols is the quality control. Quality control may be a bit technical, but it's really about making sure that the stories we're going to tell will be told with what? With some integrity. When we talk about consistency measures, we are asking questions like, would another researcher looking at the same scene see what we are seeing? We have to be very consistent and ensure that the level of biasness is a bit reduced. But though this is a bit more arguable. Then data collection strategies and field note techniques. How do we capture rich, meaningful data through our field notes? To do this, I want you to think of yourself as both a documentary filmmaker and maybe a critic. We need to record what's happening whilst also trying to do what? Make sense of it. And to do that, let's look at it from different angles. First, let's start with descriptive notes. For descriptive notes, these are your objective observations. It basically refers to what has happened. When we are talking of descriptive notes, you have to imagine that you are creating a vivid picture that someone else could visualize perfectly. Are you getting it? You want to be able to capture what? Concrete observations. And you want to do that in a chronological way. Then there's also the issue of reflective notes. For reflective notes, this is where you put your analysis hat on. The notes you capture, your intellectual journey through the research, you will also make some notes. Your personal insights, you write it down. When you start seeing connections or patterns emerging from your observations, you note it down. When you see theoretical connections, you have a theory you are using, and now you see that playing out. This is where you link what you are seeing with the existing theories you have already reviewed. You make your notes. In terms of the methodology, there may be some decisions you have to also, you document everything such that nothing would escape you. When we are talking about observation, it is also important that we explore two pillars that can help us in document. We sometimes will have structured templates. When we are talking of structured templates, please think of these as your research camera lenses. Each one will help you capture data in a specific way because they are structured. So examples of structured templates are observation grades, time logs, what is happening at a particular point in time, incident reports, and maybe participant tracking. Now, there's also the other component I want us to look at is organizational systems. And organizational systems are frameworks that can help you as a researcher make sense of all the data you have gathered. And these are the coding schemes, cross-referencing, indexing systems, and data matrix. Majority of these things will be more meaningful when we are dealing with data analysis techniques. Even in some contexts, we can use visual documentation by taking pictures or maybe making sketches or maps of what we have observed in the field setting. In other instances, we may use audio. We may use recorders to be able to record them. When we are dealing with audio recording, we have to follow some audio recording protocols. What kind of equipment are we using? What kind of equipment are we using? What kind of equipment are we using? It's very important. For instance, if you are going to record audio or you are going to take pictures, the kind of camera you are using is very important. What quality standards are allowable in terms of your research guidelines? You should also always have backup procedures. How are you going to manage your files? And also anticipate the fact that if there are emergencies, and the possibility of you losing your data is high. So you have to think about backup procedures and your file management. Apart from that, recording guidelines. Before you record anybody, one of the critical protocols you need to consider will be the consent processes. They must always agree. You cannot record someone without their consent. You also have to consider time stamping. Time stamping in terms of who said what and at what time. And then later on, we will look at using transcription methods. Okay. Now, the next thing I want us to look at is digital tools and software. Yeah, these days there are so many digital tools out there that we can use to support our data collection, especially in terms of participant observation and fieldwork. These days, the most common ones are the mobile note-taking apps, voice recording, photo documentation, and even location tracking apps. For the analysis software, this is a topic on its own, which we'll be considering as part of our qualitative data analysis techniques. Okay, this brings us to the end of our discussion on participant observation and fieldwork. Thank you very much.